I'm going to introduce our speaker, Dan Blewett. Now you've got the handout in front of you and kind of his arm care program that he'll talk you through. I met Dan about a year ago at the Illinois High School Baseball Coaches Clinic. He presented there. One of the things that struck me on his baseball card, it had, player, coach, baseball guy. Like, that's my guy. We actually started talking about statistics for Game Changer. Your coaches probably use a lot of Game Changer. And being a former pro player, he's like, this is great for MLB, but it means nothing to college, nothing to high school really, and very little to youth programs. Dan runs the Warbird Academy down in Normal. Gives lessons and has a program there that they put together teams. But he goes beyond just that ordinary. As you'll see that right away when he begins to speak. But that's how we initially met. Started talking baseball statistics. Then he got me hooked into technology. And as you can see, he's in the major leagues. I'm still at the Class A independent. But he's going to get me up to AA where I think I'll be comfortable. So his experiences are going to be shared with you. I'm not going to say any more except you got a great resource. All right, you will not find a guy that knows more about arm and arm care because he lived it. Okay, and his passion, is to make sure this doesn't happen to anybody else, and we can appreciate that. So we're very fortunate to have him. Let's give it a round of applause.
All right, thank you guys for having me. Thank you, Joe, for setting this up. So, as Joe said, I have a unique perspective on baseball, on arm care. I've been a player, I've been a coach, I'm still a coach. I've done 5,000 lessons in my day. I'm sure Joe's at least doubled that. But today we're going to talk about arm care from my perspective. And my goal as a sort of baseball educator is to give you the things you need to know and not weigh you down with stuff you don't. Because I could cover millions of things. We have like 30, 40, 50 arm care exercises that we cover in my academy that are just a lot of times too much for a coach to implement with his team, or for a dad to implement with his son, or for a son to feel motivated to do. So I'm going to hopefully give you guys a bunch of stuff, but we're going to start with my story here today. So this guy here on the left, I look kind of like Harry Potter. That was me at about 14, and this was me in 2015 at close to age 30, closing out, I think I was 29. So for you guys here today, a lot of you are probably smaller than I was at your age. A lot of you are bigger than you were at my age. A lot of you are probably better than I was at your age. And I was a good player on all my teams. I always started. I was always a talented player. But as I got older, my work ethic had to start to take shape, and I had to put in a lot more work than just simply loving baseball and playing it for fun. So years later, I became an all-star. I was an all-star twice in pro seasons. And what those accolades are great. There's something to put on the mantelpiece, but for me, they meant more because I became an all-star after both of my Tommy John surgeries. So I'll be completely transparent today. I've had a lot of elbow problems as a kid. I've had a lot of elbow problems as an adult pitcher. And I know a lot of people, when they listen to me speak or they read my writing or my videos on the web, they say, well, why would I want to listen to a guy who couldn't keep himself healthy? And it's a valid question. But for me, it's kind of like if you know someone who's maybe got diabetes and they're trying to beat it, like they really want to beat it and get healthy. Like, who knows more about blood sugar and healthy nutrition than they do, right? If someone's trying to beat cancer, who knows more about that fight and all the things they can do to keep their cell counts where they want it and to win that battle for their family, right? So for me, I was always a kid who had arm problems, but I always tried to stay on the field as much as I could. So I learned a lot over the years, and a lot of that stuff I give back to my players, and that's been a big part of my journey. So I do own an academy, so this clicker is, okay. This is my academy down in Bloomington, Illinois. I've lived there for the last 9 years. I moved here after my first year of pro baseball. I played for the Normal Corn Belters. So we train a lot of kids just like yourself every single day. And these are a couple guys from our teams. We run a academy of teams called the Warbird Senators. They play travel baseball this year. We just have 3, 14, 15, and 16. And we chose the name Senator because we wanted to make sure people knew that we were real cool. And I have 2 books. Pitching Isn't Complicated is my pitching manual, and that was published 6 years ago. And Dear Baseball Gods, a memoir about my really up and down baseball career. That one's coming out in April. And I do online courses. I do a lot of different stuff on the web to help teach people from beyond my immediate local circle. And then I want to introduce you guys to my elbow. So he and I have had a long, tumultuous relationship. And the cover image of this presentation, this was my MRI. And if you look at here, all this white. So when you get any major injury, a lot of times they'll do what's called an MRI arthrogram, which is when they inject this dye into your elbow. And that's what you'll see. It'll highlight very, very bright on an MRI. It makes it a lot easier for the doctor to read whether you're hurt or not. And so in this area here, you can see it's kind of like muddy, right? It's not as like clean and smooth edges. This should be gray. But because my ligament was torn, you could see that dye flowing into an area that it shouldn't have been at. So this was me right after surgery as they were changing my wounds. And this one, I'm glad it's a little bit dark. It's a little hard to see because there's a lot of bruising, and that was a couple days out of surgery. But you hear about it on TV. It's a very personal thing. It's a very like emotional, and it's a very difficult surgery to go through. We hear about, oh, everyone comes back and they throw harder, and they're pitching back in the major leagues, but there's a lot of players, and I was a success story. I came back from 2 of these, and the odds coming back from a second one is very, very slim. But there's lots of guys, even though it's a successful surgery, that never come back. You don't hear about them because they just sort of fade away, and we get on with our lives, and there's new pitchers, doing great things in the majors. But there's a lot of players that I played with who they just lost 3 or 4 miles per hour, and then suddenly they couldn't get hitters out the same way. And so now their ERA rises, and they get the axe. So I want to tell you guys a lot about my journey. And so I'll start with a story. So when I was a high school senior, I started having arm problems as a sophomore. So I loved baseball. I played all the time in my backyard. And I had a best friend named Kevin when I was 10, 11, 12, 13. And me and Kevin would play in the backyard all the time. Like every day after school we would play. And I loved a long toss, and my dad would hit me fly balls. I'd hit my buddies fly. We just loved baseball. But when I got to high school as a sophomore, I was pitching, and it was a cold day. I was pitching for varsity my sophomore year. And I just felt like a little pop in my elbow, and it swelled up, and I thought my career was over. And back then, this was 2000, maybe 2001 or 2002, there wasn't that much. I'd never heard of UCLs or Tommy John surgery or any of that stuff. It was very unknown. And so I just cried, and I thought my career was over. I didn't know what was going on, but I got healthy again. We got some therapy, and I moved on. But for the rest of my high school career, my arm really hurt. I didn't throw as hard as I used to, and it was a struggle. Pitching wasn't fun. I'd go out there and throw 3 innings. My arm would just be throbbing, and baseball wasn't very fun. I got to college. I had a really good curveball. I didn't earn a scholarship, but I was a walk-on to a small Division I. Are any of you guys big college basketball fans? So the UMBC Retrievers that upset the, was it Kansas? I'm exposing myself. But UMBC, they won. They were the only 16 seed to beat a number 1 seed in the history of NCAA basketball. That was my alma mater. So small baseball school, but I got a chance, and my arm started to get better as I got into college. And being a no scholarship kid, I realized that my career was going to come to an end. I threw about 80 miles per hour as a high school senior and as a freshman. And you guys know, you probably throw harder than that. You're pretty tall. It's not very good in today's terms, especially. But I didn't want my career to come to an end because I loved the game. And so when I was a freshman, I started hanging in my weight room. I started asking everyone, what can I do to be better? And so one of the things that I found was arm care. I started doing any exercise I could find on the web, or my doctor would give me, all these rehab programs I was doing, because I'm wow, this is great. I can strengthen my arm. That's the thing that throws the ball towards the hitter. This sounds awesome. If I just add a couple miles per hour here, couple from my legs, couple from my core, I can just trickle all this extra velocity in, and maybe I'll reach 90 miles per hour. And I did 2 years later. So I started off super motivated to do arm care, not only because I wanted to stay healthy, but because I wanted to throw harder and one day pitch in the major leagues. And I knew I had to do something to get there. So that was a thing that I could use, just like if you wanted to climb a mountain and you had no equipment, but suddenly someone gives you a pair of, they give you an axe, and they give you some those crampon, those spiky shoes. Now you can start to go up there, right? So it was just a tool that I had to hopefully help me get to the major leagues, because that was my ultimate goal. So I started off really, really passionate about arm care. And as I progressed, I got hurt as a junior in college. I underwent my first Tommy John surgery as a redshirt redshirt junior, so that was my 4th year, and I sat out my last year in college, and that was really, really crushing. I threw out the ceremonial first pitch on our last game of the season, the last day of my college career. They set that up for me. It was really a nice gesture for them to do, but it was really tough to sit through my last year and know that baseball was ending. And so after that, arm care continued to be a thing to help keep me on the field. I continued to have arm problems, but I continued to do more and more to try to stay healthy because I just wanted to stay on the field so bad. And my velocity kept climbing, so that 80-mile-per-hour kid became a 91 to 94-mile-per-hour guy, back when that was still fast, like 8 years ago. And at the end, I suffered a second one in 2012, and then 4 years later, I got another chance to play. I got another couple of years. I got another all-star selection after my surgery. But at the very end, I became very burned out. My shoulder hurt, my elbow hurt, everything about my body hurt. I just used everything up. I was like an old car that was just like sputtering and like barely trying to get from point A to point B. But it had got me there. All the arm care, all the strength and conditioning, all the running stuff I did as a kid, it got me to that point. But at the very end, I was very, very burned out because when I did these tedious arm care exercises every day for 5 days a week for 10 years, it started to wear on me. So my perspective has changed over time, where I want kids, like all you guys here in attendance, to do this stuff, but I don't want you to get burned out as early as I did. I don't want baseball to become a job very, very early to you, which it kind of did for me, and I was happy to do that. But there's a way to do this, I think, right, without burning you young guys out, so that you can play the long game and still feel motivated by it when you're older, still feel that you love the game and that it's not this big chore that you have to do on a daily basis. So that's one of my big goals for today's talk, is to give you guys, you know, like, how many of you parents like doing your taxes? How many of you kids like eating broccoli? Right, like this is I actually like broccoli too, but I use it as a good example. You know, like mowing your lawn, like doing yard work, like this is one of those things. Arm care is a tedious thing. It's like filing your taxes and eating broccoli. It's stuff you have to do that's not fun to do. And so when you're signing yourself up, who wants to pitch in the major leagues one day or play baseball in the major leagues? Or at least in college, right? Hopefully that's your goal. You have to do this. You have to sign up. If you want to have your, if you want to stay an American citizen, you have to file your taxes every year, else eventually you'll go to jail. So you have to sign yourself up for arm care, because everyone gets hurt if you don't have it. And if you want to pitch in the major leagues and you want to throw as hard as those guys do, you still need to have it for that too. So it's a situation where you're going to sign up for it. And then the question is, how can we make it the best possible version so you guys can, even if you don't enjoy it, you feel motivated to do it because you know that it's getting you to your goals in the long term.
Coach, if I can interject there just real quick. I coached at Chalmers High School for many years, and we had two brothers that came through, the Newman brothers. And they sibling rivalry. One was always claiming to be better than the other. And the one that was a catcher, Greg, took care of his arm. Like to the point where you guys in high school, when you're riding the bus home, he would be icing it. Okay? And they used to laugh at him, make fun of him, And I said, Greg, you keep doing what you're doing because you're taking care of that arm's going to take care of you. He ended up being the baseball assistant coach at Oklahoma State University, and then came back to the Flyers as a hitting instructor many years later. I kept up in contact with him. And just what the coach was talking about, it's tedious, but he did it every day, and the rewards will be there. Okay, so I know that's kind of tough to hear, yeah, I gotta do that, but it will help you in the long run. So, keep that in mind, all right? Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So what we're gonna cover today, I'm gonna give you three big things. Number one, what good arm care looks like, and we'll cover this a lot in the practical section afterwards. We'll demonstrate a lot of the exercises. Challenges with arm care, again, some of the things that are gonna be tough for you as coaches or players, and then some strategies to increase compliance. So for young guys, compliance is just like, are you actually going to do it when we ask you to do it? So what's in a good arm care program? So first thing, we'll go over the following things. So number one, the shoulder blade, we all have heard probably the term scaps, right? Scaps are a big popular thing. Your scaps are your shoulder blades. So, and they do lots of different things. Your shoulder blade is going to move with your arm. So if you want to lift your arm above your head, if your shoulder blade doesn't move, you can only get this far. Your shoulder blade rises as your arm rises. Your shoulder blade moves down to help your arm move down. It does all these things. It reaches and comes back. So we want to train the shoulder blades in all movements. We want to stabilize the shoulder in the socket. your shoulder is kind of like a golf ball on a tee. We want to stabilize it in there so it's not rattling around and banging into stuff. And then we want to build rotator cuff endurance and strength. And your rotator cuff is this group of muscles that basically accelerates and decelerates your arm when you throw a ball and keeps it, again, stable in the socket. So again, this is the big analogy for your shoulder. So other joints, like there's a guy named Bo Jackson. Do any of you young guys know Bo Jackson? He was like the best athlete in the history of the humankind. He was strong enough where he got tackled and actually dislocated his hip bone, which is really hard to do. He was just like so strong that he could do it. But your hip bone is a really deep socket. So socket and the ball, it cradles all the way around it. It's very difficult to dislocate your hip. Your shoulder, however, is very shallow. It's a lot like a golf ball sitting on a tee. And so your shoulder is very easy to dislocate. If you tackle somebody in football, often you can break your collarbone or you can dislocate your shoulder. It's just like, again, kind of like flicking that ball off the tee. And so the muscles around it are incredibly important, because it's kind of like if I put my hand up by that golf ball and now all my fingers are holding it onto the tee, that's kind of like what your shoulder does. It just holds it in place so it doesn't fall off when the wind blows. So our rotator cuff and all these muscles, they're there to keep that joint as stable as possible, because if it's bouncing around, what do you think what starts to happen? Stuff starts to get broken, right? So just like that bull in a china shop idea. So injury and risk factors. I know there's a lot of text on this slide. I don't like text-heavy slides. But these are like the main 5 injuries that you'll hear about. There's a lot of different ones, but Tommy John surgery, rotator cuff tears, labrum surgery, tendonitis, and growth plate injuries. So you could have a fractured growth plate or have growth plate inflammation. And most of these have common risk factors. So overuse, when you throw really hard, that just sort of exposes you to more risk in general. You put more stress to your arm. But for almost all of these, a weak and unstable rotator cuff, this group of muscles that holds that golf ball on your tee, those are common risk factors to all of these. So when you have tendonitis, often because you're weak, your shoulder and your mechanics, they start to degrade as you fatigue during a game. And then it gets harder to stay in like the proper tolerances, and then you get an irritated arm. Your labrum is this piece of tissue that basically goes underneath that tee to make it deeper. It kind of deepens your socket to hold your shoulder in place. So labrum surgery is almost, I wouldn't say it's completely preventable, but it's very preventable compared to, say, Tommy John surgery, because when you strengthen the muscles around it, it protects the labrum very, very well. Rotator cuff tears, if you just tear one of these muscles, again, if they're very strong and they have a lot of endurance, they can handle the load of throwing a ball pretty well. So with most of these injuries, increasing the strength and endurance and stability of your shoulder are going to help prevent a lot of these major injuries. Tommy John surgery is one of the ones that's a little bit more difficult, because the UCL in your elbow is kind of just along for the ride. You can't strengthen it. Really, the forearm muscles and good mechanics help to protect it. But guys in the major leagues that have really good mechanics, that have great arm care regimens, that are very well taken care of, they blow their arms out all the time. And I myself was another example of that. So, let's see. Okay, so again, factors that are common to all. Poor mechanics put more stress on your arm. So when you have good mechanics, it helps you throw a ball harder. It also puts more stress on your arm. When you have poor mechanics, it puts more stress often than better mechanics do, even if you don't throw as hard. So poor mechanics are a common factor in increasing injuries, so we want to definitely improve our mechanics, and we also want to increase the stability and the strength of our rotator cuff. So if we're talking about arm care muscles, and we're going to move through this section pretty quick, your rotator cuff stabilizes your shoulder. It accelerates and decelerates the ball. Your forearm is kind of like your bodyguards for the ligament in your elbow. So you can see my scar here. If these muscles are strong, they protect this ligament a lot better. Your lateral hips. So there's the bottom half of this list are a little bit less commonly thought of as arm care, but your lateral hips, the way you go down the mound, if you don't have good strength in your hips, it's tough to have good mechanics, or your mechanics tend to break down over the course of a game or a season. So lots of kids that we work with, we do tons of lateral hip work, but the kids that have stronger hips, they can have better mechanics because they can get into some of these positions like this one as I'm going down the mound. So that's really sort of like an arm care muscle. We kind of group that in there as well. The core transfers power from your lower body to your upper body, and the core helps keep your mechanics together as fatigue sets in. So your core is incredibly important for getting your arm to this exact same position every single time, because as pitchers fatigue, suddenly their arm dips and now they go out and now they put more stress on their arm from pitches 80 to 100. So it's very important to keep arm mechanics intact throughout all 9 innings that we might be pitching. And lastly, delts, pecs, lats, your back, all these other muscles in your body, they're important and they sort of contribute, just like another hand on deck to accelerating and decelerating the ball. So a couple things to consider, and we'll move through this pretty quick. Your shoulder blade in your arm goes through a bunch of different things. So if I retract, well, everyone put your arms out for me. So when your hands are here, when you retract your shoulder blades, you're just pinching them. So you squeeze them back like that. That's one of the movements that your shoulder blades do. Then the opposite is protraction. If you punch, you just reach out. You feel like your shoulders kind of stretch and they reach forward. That's protraction. The other two motions are elevation. Your shoulder blade will sort of rotate up. So if you raise your arm up, that's elevation. And then depression, your shoulder blade sort of packs down. So on my back, you'd see that my shirt kind of wrinkles as my shoulder blades pull back into the middle of my back. So those are the 4 main motions that your shoulder blades will go through, and we want to train all those. Again, that's going to help give you a balanced shoulder musculature. And then external rotation is really, really important. If there's one movement that we're really focusing on, it's external rotation, and that is this or this, which again is the opposite of accelerating a ball. And then endurance, we want to protect, again, from fatigue. So you wouldn't want to just do a couple reps of a set. You'd want to do more reps because it helps build, again, resistance against fatigue from these long innings that we're going to pitch. All right, let's move on here. Okay. And then strength and stability, the 2 others, we've talked a bunch about those. So examples of exercises, we'll go through these a little bit later. Without touching on these here, we'll do those in the practical section. But we want to, again, we have exercises that will train all the different ones that we just talked about just now. All right, come on. This is maxed out in its distance. Okay. So let's go over some challenges because, again, we'll get back to the exercise on the practical part. But number 1, just like the last section of our arm care talk, very boring, very tedious. So the question is, how can we motivate our players to do the arm care they want? So for me, my goal today, again, is not to give you all the exercises in the world. It's really to give you tools to help motivate your kids so they can see it as a positive thing that they want to do. Because if they're not motivated to see it as a tool to climb up that mountain to the major leagues, then they're probably not going to put in the time. And I know from my academy personally, we struggle to get our kids to do arm care. Because at practice, you only have so much time. You want to cover baseball skills. And arm care is slow. It has to be done well. It's usually 20, 30 minutes, that kind of thing. So we don't really want to take that practice time away. And so having kids do it at home when they can do it in front of the TV is really critical. But then the question is, will they do it when they could do other stuff at home? This is really a tough thing. So motivating someone to do them at home on Friday nights like I would in college is really the bigger challenge for me, because whether I have the world's best program is irrelevant if I give it to people and they just don't do it, right? So that's really, really important. Challenge number 2, again, it takes a lot of time away from practices, so we want to make sure we have a good at-home program. Like doing it and forcing them to do it at practice is important. That's a good piece of the discipline that we want our kids to have. But I think an at-home program not only builds self-discipline, like this is part of your routine if you want to be a high-level player, this is important, but again, we have to get them to do it. And then, lastly, players speed through this. So with all this stuff, our goal is to strengthen these little small muscles in the shoulder. And to do that, we want to be slow and methodical, and we have to use lesser weight. And when you use less weight, it's real easy to breeze through some of these exercises and feel like you're not doing anything, which is true if you're going too fast. So going slow and having kids do it properly with really good form, really methodically and diligently, that's what we're looking for. And so we have to encourage them to go slow. So even if kids are doing it at home, a lot of times they're speeding through it, or if they're doing it out in left field while I'm doing something else as a coach, they're speeding through it and it's almost like we're not doing it. So going slow is really important. So one of the solutions that we'll talk about today is, instead of sets, so like 3 sets of 12 reps, we just do time sets. So now there's no benefit. If they're going to do an exercise for a minute, they might as well do it slow, because doing it fast or slow, it's still the same amount of time. So that's a good solution that we've talked about before. But here's the big thing. I'm going to introduce a topic, it's a concept. Has anyone here heard about the analogy of the elephant and the rider, a man riding an elephant? Okay, it's one of my favorites, and I have this really good graphic. So we have to motivate. Come on, Gay. Okay, a little dim, but I photoshopped my face onto this man riding an elephant. So in psychology, this is a concept that basically we are together an elephant and a rider. And the rider is the voice of reason in all of our heads. So since I retired from baseball, I've had a tough time getting myself to do some of the things I did as a player, which was like work out like a madman, work out consistently, eat as healthy as I did. And so for me personally, the rider is saying, look, we need to eat healthy. We need to like, blah, 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 be back on track training and get in excellent physical shape like we were before. And my elephant's like, nah, we did that for so long. We did that for 10 years. Like, I'm over it. Like, what's the point? Why do I want to do that? So for us to get change to happen, we have to be bought in both with the logical reasons. And this is why when you see like major changes in organizations or in the country and laws, we can spout off all the logical reasons that we want, change, or this law to pass, this bill to pass. But without some emotional response behind it, people don't really get behind it. So we need to get people, their emotional side, on board. So again, for arm care with me, I desperately wanted to pitch in the major leagues. I desperately wanted to stay on the field. So my elephant was motivated by doing that, right? When this guy said, I'll throw harder, that's great, but that wasn't enough, right? That wasn't enough to even motivate me. Like if I tell you guys, you'll throw harder from arm care, you'll feel healthier, that doesn't maybe mean that much to you. But if I say, this was my experience going through surgery, and you can maybe get to the major leagues if you do enough arm care, if you're good enough in your training regimen, that's the kind of stuff that gets people to go. That was what motivated me my whole career. I knew how hard pitching through pain was, and I knew how hard surgery was. I didn't want to go through that again, and I desperately wanted to pitch in the major leagues. So my elephant would run, and no matter what he said, he was going to be fine with it. So we have to motivate the elephant and the rider. So one of the ways to do this, I think, is having speakers. I think is having motivational videos. So if you have any alumni or like guys who are from the local area who might want to come back, who maybe been through an injury or been through some of the times that like I have, they can help kids understand like what that feels like. Again, going through Tommy John surgery twice was crushing. I mean, who knows how my career would have ended up had I not had that second one. When I got my second elbow surgery, I was leading the league in ERA, in batting average against, and I was voted the leading vote getter for the All-Star game that year. So that was probably my season at 26, where I was probably going to get signed into a major league organization out of independent pro baseball and get my shot. But leading the league, I had to watch the All-Star game go by that year. I made the team, and I had to sit and wave to the fans, and I couldn't pitch because I was waiting for surgery. So stuff like that is a really big motivator that can help kids understand that, look, this is what it takes. This is the emotional side of the game. This is why we need this, not just fact A, fact B, fact C. The other thing that's really, really important, and I use the analogy here of dishes. So I like my apartment. I have a unique apartment, but I don't have a dishwasher, which is really annoying because I'm very busy. But when you see, this is not my apartment, by the way. I don't have enough plates or food, but anyway, when you see something like that, like dishes pile up because dishes have already piled up, and it's like, it's going to be this thing I have to slog through, and I don't even know where to start, right? It just seems like an absolute nightmarish mess. And when you give someone this long program, here's 30 exercises you need to do, you got to do this for half an hour every night, what do? We just end up not doing it, right? We have to do our taxes on time. And you have to go through all this paperwork. I have to go back through all my expenses for the year. I have to put all this stuff in a spreadsheet, and we put all this stuff off until the very last minute because we just don't want to do it. We can see how much work it is. And this is a nightmare. But I read a great book about motivation, and one of the stories was about a woman who helps people clean up their houses and all this stuff. And she says, look, just tell yourself you're going to clean one dish. Just start with one plate. That's all you have to do. Like legitimately, if you want to clean one plate and stop, you're allowed to. And so what happens? You take that first plate, that gross one right there with that really old food on it, you clean that one plate, and then what happens? You're like already underway, so you clean another, and then you clean another, and then you clean another, and then suddenly the whole thing is done. So when you make this task seem hard, I need to clean 35 plates and throw all this disgusting food away. I have to do an hour's worth of dishes. You're just not going to do it. But if someone says, just clean one glass and one bowl and one plate, it starts to get done, right? So the goal here, again, is to motivate your elephant. Like, that is a terrible task. That's what I did every day for like a decade, and it sucked. And I wouldn't want that for other people. It got me where I needed to go, but it also super duper burned me out. So again, this is what my elephant tells me when I want to do that, right? So we have to understand that to get this stuff done, I wonder how many times I can click this before it goes. 10 minutes worth, lot simpler. 5 exercises, very, very simple. And the elephant says, okay. Like, I'm not enthused about it, but that's a lot easier. Just 10 minutes, just five exercises. Just do these 3 exercises, whatever it is, just get something done. It's much simpler, and you'll get kids to buy in for the long haul if you can reduce your program to very small chunks, even though you might feel like, man, if you just did all this stuff, think about how much it would do for you. That's not wrong, but long term, it's going to be a tough sell, because at some point you're like, I've been doing this every day for 6 months, and then you take 4 months off and you're back to square one. Whereas if it was easy to do every single day, then you never take those big steps back, and you can continue to make progress forever. So that's the big thing. Playing the long game is important. And we do this in our academy with strength training, with all sorts of stuff. I'm not like a high energy strength coach, and I'm not on a daily basis trying to get 110% out of every kid, because I know if you do that and you're making it this boot camp style thing, what if they only train 6 months out of the year because it's so hard that they can't handle it for the next 6 months? Or what if it was 80% as hard as that, but they did it for 10 months out of the year? Which is better? And for me, I think easy and shorter is better long term than long and hard and complex. So, I mean, this is just an example, and I made these numbers up. I mean, this is correct math if you do that math. But, say it was an 8-minute workout, and they did it 4 days a week, because they can stomach it, a little more often. 4 weeks in a month, 9 months out of a year, that gives you 1,150 minutes of arm care for the year. But say you had a long and complex hard workout like the one I did for so long, 20 minutes or more, 3 days a week, times 4 weeks, times 4 months. Because say you're only going to do it during baseball season when you're being forced by your coach because it's kind of miserable. And then you kind of take the rest of the year off, which unfortunately is what most kids do. I mean, I've been doing this for a while. Most kids, they'll do it if they're forced to do it, and then when they're not, they don't. So you can see you get less time, even though they got a big cluster here. And then the other thing that's untold about this is that, yeah, those numbers aren't crazy far apart, but those 8 months where they're not doing anything, they go back to square one. Whereas this person, even though they just do little, they take little, a tiny little pill of it every day, they never take those big steps back, and they continue to build the body that they want over time. So to me, that's really important, is thinking about it as a long game. So again, yeah, those numbers I made up, I could massage them however I wanted to, but we want to build long-term habits, especially with young kids, because we want to keep the passion for the game there, and we also want to keep our strength maintaining over time, right? It's probably better to run 10 minutes a day every day of the year for your cardiovascular health than to run for 30 minutes a day for just a couple months in a row and then stop, right? We know that. So that's really a big thing. So the last section of our talk today, just some simple solutions that I think can benefit you guys as coaches, because we use a couple of these and I think they help a lot. Because again, if at-home program is the core of getting kids to do this, then we need some resources other than just I can teach them in person, because I know that I can't teach my kids when they're at home. So they need something to refer back to. So number one, very, very simple, this is also free, is a YouTube playlist. So if you don't have a YouTube channel, you can easily make one, and you can just go into YouTube, Google how to make a YouTube channel, and you'll find videos by lots of people showing you how to do this. Very, very simple. You just film it, iPhones and Google Pixels and all these, I mean, the phone technology is great today where you can get a really solid camera video and you could just hammer out 10 of them on a Saturday, film out all your arm care, and I've filmed all these for you, so you guys will have everything that's on that sheet there today at your disposal. But very easy to do this with your team in a custom way, so you could have your players demonstrate them and buy in and take some ownership of it too. And you could have a private YouTube playlist or public, either one you want, and make it a very simple thing like, hey guys, here's the link, make sure you go on. So this is one of my YouTube playlists. I have a ton of them, but it could look like this, and here's all the different videos. You can add them in there, drag them and drop them. You could change them as the season goes, but very, very simple. And kids, I mean, how many of you guys watch YouTube, you young guys? All of them, all the time, right? Make sure you subscribe to my channel. All right. So I do have good videos, I think. But very, very simple, and it's a great solution because they're gonna know what to do, and if they don't, they can easily watch it. It's their platform, they're comfortable with it. I think there's a lot of buy-in with YouTube. Number 2 is an online course. We also do this for my Senators program. This is the platform I use for my courses. You can do it for free. You could do it there's no reason you need to pay for it, but they have free platforms. I use Teachable, it's great. So if you take one of my courses, or if you made your own course, it would look just like this. So it just lays it all out there. You can drag and drop. Same thing as a YouTube playlist, just a little more polished, I'd say. And there's an app for iPhones and all that. So very, very simple. You could make this as a team. You could have fielding drills. You could have arm care drills. You could have our team warm up. You can make this stuff, again, YouTube playlist or Teachable. There's other online course formats. They're very, very simple, and it's a really great thing to do because, again, we're moving into the technology age where if you give kids a paper, and I know I gave you a paper today, but I don't really believe in paper anymore. I mean, it's a digital age. Paper is great sometimes, but again, kids are comfortable. We're all training. Are you guys, young guys, millennials? I'm a millennial technically, but Joe's not a millennial. You're an old person. Yeah, but this is where everything's going. So getting your team on board with this now and starting to get yourself comfortable as a coach with a little more of the tech stuff, I think is definitely a benefit for you guys long term.
And that's what we're trying to do with Wasco. So that's what we're filming this, and Dan's been good about coaching me, hey, to coach that, so that all our coaches will have access to things like this.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
And then the last big thing that's really important is, I think, being minimalistic in your equipment. With arm care, you could do dumbbells and bands and all these different things, but you don't have to, especially with younger guys. You just want to get them moving. So having, like the bands you'll get from us today are very simple. That's why I like them. We use them with this volleyball club that we consult with. So all 100 girls of that program use the bands. All of our players use them. They're very simple. They're easy to pack. They're small. They're versatile. So having just a very minimal equipment that's easy to do anywhere you want, which again is a feature of those, is really, really important because, again, our goal at the end of the day, come on guy, there you go, is to make it easy. So for us, the core of most of our programs are body weight. So this is my business partner, Lucas. He's just doing a body weight arm exercise, which we'll go over some of those today. And then this is the band. It's like a flat latex band. Actually, it's not latex, so it doesn't have allergy concerns, but it has loops every 6 inches, so you can kind of grab it and make it like self-handle. Very, very simple. So having a minimalist approach, a kid goes home, coach says I need to do my arm care today. All they need to do is, I remember the 5 exercises, and where's my little band? Here's my band. And then they can go, and they can do it in front of the TV, and it's very, very simple, and they're gonna get it done. Because again, I just have fought this for so many years that, man, like I know a lot about strength and conditioning and arm injuries and all this stuff, and you'd love to give someone like the world's best program. But if it doesn't get done, it's just not worth it. And to simplify it to where kids will consistently do it, and it's easy for you as a coach to feel like you understand it and you can implement it, because you need to be able to teach this too, that just solves all the problems. And I think that's the bigger thing, because if you can get them to do something consistently, then again, it's a long-term habit. It's a very big benefit for your team. You'll definitely cut down on injury time. There's no more disabled lists, so it's injury list now, but very, very important going forward. So I think being minimalistic is key.
Coach, can I just hit something here real quick because it went off?
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. That one camera was going to end. So to summarize, again, the biggest fight is getting kids to do it, and then also not burning them out and making it a long-term job. Because again, The biggest thing for me as a coach, having been through a lot of the hard times, I've pitched through a lot of pain, I've jogged out to the mound multiple times, pretty certain that I was going to blow my arm out in that game that day, and twice that was true. There's a lot of hard times in baseball. And so the more we can make the game fun and give kids the dose of the thing that they need, like mixing in the great flavoring with their medicine, I think is a big positive. You want to create a balanced, simple program, and I'll give you guidelines on how to do that with the program today. We want to motivate our emotional side more than just logic. If you just tell your kids that this is why you need to do this, it's the same for you adults. Like, why you need to eat broccoli, but we all still don't eat it, right? We know why we need to do our taxes. It still stinks. So getting something else where kids can listen to somebody they look up to. I mean, if you guys ever need me to come talk to your teams, I'm happy to do it. Just ways to motivate kids is really, really important. And then lastly, again, at-home plans are a must, and I think the web resources and tech is really important. So going forward today, we can do Q&A now, or we could do it later. Obviously, we'll demonstrate all the exercises. I'll show you how to use the bands, and then we can just kind of wrap with whatever you guys want. And then I'm going to shoot all of you an email. I'll send you all these additional resources. So all the exercises that are on that sheet today, I have an online course set up for you guys. You can get into for free, and you'll have all videos to everything that's on there. So you don't have to, if you need to space out after this long talk and not pay attention while we do exercises, don't worry, you'll have videos to help you through that later. So that's it. So we'll jump into the demonstration, and if you guys have any questions now, I can definitely address them. If not, we can kind of go as we're demonstrating. Anything?
Actually, I do have a question.
Yeah.
My son broke a bone right in his elbow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, growth plate fracture.
So he missed all fall ball. Now we just started playing catch. We're just wondering, is there too much we could be doing, or should that be certain exercises to help build it? Because obviously everything's fatigued now.
Mm-hmm.
We're not throwing for half a year.
How old are you? 11. I mean, the big thing with young kids, and this covers all of you guys. So how old are you guys?
14.
14? What about you? You're 14? 14 and 13? Okay. The biggest thing for young kids is that strength and conditioning programs are also great arm care, just because their whole body, it's, pitching and throwing is a system. It's your whole body. So any kind of strength and conditioning would be helpful to him. If it doesn't bother him, he could do it. This arm care stuff, if it doesn't bother him, he can definitely do it. And then hopefully they just give you some kind of progressive throwing program, or at the very least, you just think, okay, what does easing it back into it look like? So, if you're just to map out, like, here we are today, we haven't thrown, and in 8 weeks, I want to be pitching in games. And this is really the way they build out pitching programs, the way they get guys ready for spring training. This is the way I got ready for spring training. You say, here's my end goal. Here's where I am today. What do I need to build to take slow stepping stones to get from here to there? So if you'll have to throw, 40 pitches in a game as hard as you can, well, then, okay, I have 8 weeks. If we start at 50%, which is kind of like the baseline, like 50% effort, like a short throw, 50% this week, 60% the next, 70%, 80, 90, a couple weeks at 90 and 100, and then you're ready for games. So you just kind of back it up like that. You start with, okay, I'll do 3 days a week this week, 50 throws. And then next week, 4 days a week, 50 throws. Then 4 days a week, 60 throws. And you just basically can step it out. That's really what all these doctors have done with all these throwing rehab programs. They say, okay, how long do we think this injury needs to heal? If it's 3 months or 6 months, and then really just they go back and they make sensible stepping stones from point A to point B to gradually increase the load on the muscle, on the body. So that's really, like, if I was to say make him a program, that's exactly how I would do it. I would just start with what you feel like is pretty conservative, and just slowly just try to meter it. Don't let him throw 80 if he's supposed to throw 50, and just try to keep a distance that's going to prevent him from throwing too far. So if he can only throw 150 feet, if you're stretching really far out, he's going to throw 100% effort at some point to get it out that far. So distance can be a good meter, where if you're pretty close to each other, like if I was going to play catch with you, I try not to kill you, so I'd take it off the gas a little bit. But to answer your question, he can do, because we've had kids, I think we had one kid last year, another kid 2 years ago. The growth plate injuries are hard. They're not super preventable. It's not like they're always overused. The last 2 kids that we had weren't. It's just the fact that some kids that throw really hard, or their body is just not ready for throwing. Throwing is not I don't know that it's an unnatural motion, but because I think we've been throwing things for as long as we can remember. You know, even if we were monkeys at some point, we were throwing, you know, poo at each other, whatever. But, you know, we were throwing spears and rocks and all this stuff to help us eat for a long time. So I don't know that it's really a natural motion, but it's a stressful motion for sure. And so every kid's body handles it differently. And if you look at me and my career, I didn't deserve to have 2 partial elbow tears and 2 full tears. Like I wasn't lazy. I didn't have bad mechanics. If you look at me at 15, I had nice mechanics. I have some video of myself from a long time ago, and you know, I looked good. I don't remember who my coaches were who taught me, but they did a pretty good job. But I had way more elbow problems than every other kid. So at some point, when you see guys, you know, in the major leagues, you hear these legendary stories about guys who, you know, drink so much beer and they don't take care of themselves and they pitch 10 years healthy. They pitch 2,000 innings. It's not because there's not always a correlation between work ethic and all this other stuff. There's sometimes just everyone's body's unique, and that's sometimes tough to accept because, again, on the web, we all know how vicious the web can be sometimes. People like have taken shots at me numerous times, like this guy can't keep himself healthy. But I know what I did. I know that I've seen other players, and I know that there's not always a fairness in being healthy. You know, guys like Mark Pryor, did he deserve to blow his arm out 1,000,000 times? Kerry Wood could never stay healthy, right? It's not like they were lazier or did worse things than other people to deserve that. The human body's just different. And some guys, like you look at Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, they both have really good mechanics, but so do most guys in the majors. And why can they throw 2,000 innings at 98 miles per hour and not be hurt, right? There's just some genetic luck in all of it. And
I'll
yeah.
take you up on the Mark Pryor off-record conversation. But to his point, and Coach started his presentation, I remember, with bringing back kids, you know, to talk about this. And it made me think, when I was coaching Wasco, we had a 12U kid. He's currently playing JUCO. He's a D1 player. He turned down a D2, D3 offer because he knows he can do better. He had to sit out at Cooperstown. Okay, did you guys go to Cooperstown?
I haven't been done it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big deal. He could not play in Cooperstown. He could DH because he had the elbow, you know, you're talking about the growth plate, couldn't throw. And his dad pitched in college. His dad was our pitching coach. So he had good mechanics.
Yeah.
Great kid, worked hard, took care of himself. He's one of those kids that we said, take a journal, write everything down. Guess what? He wrote everything down. I mean, he was that serious about it because he knew he wanted to play, you know, in college. That was his end goal. But he couldn't, and it had nothing to do with anything except, you know, it did happen. So, you know, it's not a be-all, end-all, but it is, you know, understand that it's not anything, a certain fault necessarily. Could be mechanical, you know, could be the way you take care of it. Could be the overuse, that's the word, you know, we saw up there with a lot of that stuff. But the goal is not to let it happen again, or to, you know, prevent that, or make sure that you're aware of how these little things, and I love the analogy, Coach, by the way, first time I saw it, hey, you know, that it's so tough to get the motivation. I'm fine. You know, we had 2 kids get drafted out of our high school. They needed Tommy John surgery the next year because our coach, okay, didn't care about the elephant. Always like, I got 3 stud pitchers, they're pitching every 3rd day. I don't care. And I tried to convince them otherwise, and those guys are, you know, back, one's coaching in the area, and they're like, I wish it wouldn't have happened. Same thing Dan's saying, you know, because, you know, it did. So appreciate the question. Okay, sorry for interrupting.
No, you're good. So,
but it's all good, and that's why, and again, I'm going to bring Timmy back to talk to our Wasco guys, because he'd be a great example of, you know, what they go through and how important it is. Like I shared with Greg Newman, you know, people laughing at him on the bus. Well, guess what? Baseball did a lot for him. You know, he made a living out of it. So his arm took care of him. So that's the important point. So I'll shut up and we'll let Dan take over again.
yeah, but I mean, it's not all just about preventing injury. I mean, for you guys who want to throw harder, if you're 14 today, you have 4 more years before you graduate high school. You know, if you're 11, 12, you have 6, 7 years. If you just added a couple miles per hour from doing a little bit of strength training every year, a little bit of arm care, like it's a big bucket that you try to trickle in over time. And for me, I was, again, a 78 to 81 mile per hour pitcher as a college freshman. And I was 86 to 89 the next year. And then after that, it was like slow. You know, you're fighting 12 months to get 1 or 2 miles per hour. I think who here wants to get, if you heard a seminar was going to get 1/10 of a mile per hour to your fastball, like, would you sign up? No, but that's what you fight for over time. You know, you look at Olympic athletes, they're trying to be, you win a gold medal if you run a 9.65 in the 100 meter, and the next guy's going to run a 9.67. Like, you're fighting for so little to get a little bit better and to continue to progress in your sport. And so it's this aggregate approach. You're trying to collect every little thing, and that was kind of how I thought as a player for you younger guys, is that I thought I had this test called the doppelganger test. I studied philosophy. Does anyone know what a doppelganger is? It's you in an alternate universe. So if there was another Dan in another universe, and he had stronger legs, like bigger, stronger legs than me, like, would he throw harder than me? And I thought, yeah, he probably would. If he had stronger forearms, would he throw harder than me? Probably would. If he took better care of his arm, if he did an extra day of arm care every week, or if he did 10 extra minutes every day that he did it, would he throw harder than me? Would he make it farther in baseball than me? If he did all these other things, if this guy was a harder working version than me, what would he have that I don't have? And every day, or not every day, but on a yearly basis, I was always thinking, like, what else could that version of me be? And what could I do to bridge the gap where, if there's another alternate universe Dan, could he have bigger legs than me? And there was a point I was like, no, like, I'm really strong. Like, I don't need any more of that. What else can I do? And I tried to figure out, okay, I got everything out of this. I got everything out of this. I got everything out of this. Like, where else can I, like, squeeze that lemon to try to get a little bit more juice out? And, I became a low to mid 90s pitcher, and I got a lot of great times because of it. And I was hurt a lot, and I pitched through a lot of pain. But the alternative was my career ending as an 18-year-old or ending as a 21-year-old. And I got to play till I was 30 years old. I retired at 30. And most guys, even who get drafted and play pro baseball, are done by 24, 25. So I consider myself very lucky. And when I look back on this, arm care was a huge part of that. It was a huge part of me slowly getting better over time. And, like, there's some luck and there's just staying healthy, where I was too old by the time I was good enough to pitch in the majors. And I believe that I could have pitched in the majors. But when I was 29 and I was at that point, I was a little bit of a late bloomer. It was just like a little bit past my time. But I know that because of this approach and all the things that I did, I got pretty much every bit of juice out of my lemon that I could. And at the end of the day, like, you guys will eventually, whether it's at age 40 like Derek Jeter, enter the real world, you'll eventually enter the real world. And all these lessons that you'll learn will be the same thing that'll help you in business or in being an astronaut or whatever it is that you want to be. So that's an important takeaway. And when you guys learn that if I do this little stuff every day, whether it's, something else that you're passionate about, even if it's Fortnite. Kids get scholarships for Fortnite now. I shouldn't say that, but anything you want to do. One of our kids from my baseball program got a scholarship to a Vermont school to play Fortnite. Wow. The world's changing rapidly.
Hey Dan, quick question.
Yeah.
You got an 11-year-old who just has a real tendency to sidearm it. He's not coming over the top. Are they just asking for trouble down the road? You try to prevent that now, or what's your thoughts on that?
I think it would depend on the player, because obviously one of the best pitchers in the big leagues is Chris Sale, right? So I think it would depend on, does he sidearm the ball because he has mechanical problems and that's a symptom of it, or does he have good mechanics and his body just likes to be sidearm? Because I think there's a big difference between the two. So you can shoot me a video and I could tell you right off the bat which it was. But everyone's different. Arm angles are different. You don't want to try to fit any pitcher into, like, with cars, you can't fit any given engine into any given car, right? You got to try to find the right one for the right car. It'll tear itself apart, all that sort of stuff. But some pitchers are very successful up here, some are very successful down here, and some, you'll kind of figure it out as their mechanics change over time. Their arm will settle into the slot that's most natural when their mechanics are good, I would say. So if you have a kid who sidearms, I guess the caveat would be that most kids that sidearm the ball young, it's because they have bad mechanics. I think for most human beings, they want to be somewhere in this like 10 to 11 o'clock range. And then there's just some human beings that like it here, and then there's some human beings that like throwing here, but the vast majority are in that, 10, 11 o'clock window as a righty. So if you're really far departed from that, then there's probably a mechanical thing we're looking at. That's a good question, though.
That, Paul, yeah. The game, like you said, the game has changed. When we played, it was all, mechanics. You got to throw up here, overhand. Now, it's kind of more a business. And you get a lot of the programs that if the kid's throwing 80 here at age 14, okay, I'm not going to fix him. Why? He's going to win games for me. college coach, and this is, a question to ask when you get to that level, okay? What is your philosophy of developing players? And if they can't give you a very strong answer, that means it's by attrition. North Central College here, great school, 40 kids on the roster. Okay, you're throwing sidearms, all of a sudden you develop arm because now it's kind of catch up with me. Next. Okay, it's a business, So, the answer to that, you gotta, it's okay, and some do it. Infielders, right? Infielders don't throw over the top. Where do infielders throw from? Here all the time. In that little slot right there. They don't get arm problems. But, some do, for whatever reason. But, most of it now, you don't get the fix. And that's where, Dan comes in, and that's where we want to try to help and determine that. And we're not experts. I'm not, that's why I turn to him. But now, again, we can send him a video, and he'll give you his feedback and say, here's what you need to do, or, I wouldn't worry about it because his mechanics are okay. That's what's great about, having this partnership, I think. So,
yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Are there certain exercises that, like, you would say this is for off-season, this is stuff you do in season, or your arm care stuff, or is there, it's like before the, don't do these exercises the day after you pitch the game, or is there certain timing that you're going to break down with this, like when you should do it, when you should not do it?
That's a really good question. There definitely is, but I don't think it as much applies to this age group. So at the higher levels, so for me, my first year of pro baseball, I was off of Tommy John. So I got Tommy John my fourth year in college, missed a year, and then the next year, so it took me two full years to get back. I was figuring out my routine as a pro. So in college, you pitch once every 7 days as a starter. In pro ball, I was suddenly pitching every fifth day, and I was going 100 to 120 every time out. My pitching coach would kind of let me go. And so I was getting used to that bigger workload. I was also trying to figure out how much of this arm care I could do so I didn't hurt my elbow again. Like I was trying to be really diligent and stay healthy because I was pitching so much. And so I had struggles in the first half of that season trying to get my velocity to normalize because I would be 88 to 90 in this start. Then the next time I'd be 87 to 91. Then I'd be 90 to 93. Then I'd be 91, 92. Then I'd be 86 to 88 again. It was like, what's going on? And it was because I was doing too much between starts, one time versus another. I'd be like, oh, I threw a lot. I'm going to do a ton of my forearm stuff. And I'm going to do a ton of my, and it fatigued me where I then would throw not as hard or I'd have a little bit reduced command. So there's definitely some of that at the higher levels, but at the younger levels, I don't think too much of that is important because, again, they're playing for the future. And sure, they're playing for today, but with the volume that they're going to do, they probably can't do too much the day before and actually impact most of what they're going to do in the game anyway the next day. And there's none of the stuff that's really going to hurt them the next day after. Because all these exercises are very simple, they're very safe, they're almost like more therapeutic than they are like aggressive. So for like our pitchers, we'll recommend they don't do a lot of chin-ups during the season, they don't do many deadlifts during the season, they'll do alternative exercises that hit those same muscles but are less sort of stressful in their arm. But with arm care, I think that really when kids can just get their proper doses, and if you're as a coach saying, okay, we're going to make sure you get 3 or 4 days a week, just trying to get a little less before a game, especially if they're going to pitch. Like, if they're going to pitch Thursday, you could just not have them do arm care Wednesday and they'll be completely fresh. That's fine. Just like simple common sense stuff is really probably all you have to adhere to. But there's definitely nothing that would hurt them if they did it the day before or the day after, especially not with the volumes that they're going to do it and just like with the quality that they're going to do it.
And you think they should do it 12 months a year?
I think they should do it as much as they can stomach when they're actively playing baseball. So hopefully you guys play other sports. It's good for your athleticism. At some point, kids will often choose to specialize, and that's fine. But if they're playing all during the year, they should do it every day they're actually playing baseball. And if they're having practice, they should be doing it. So say you start baseball season like everyone else does in April, you play all through the end of July, they're fine to stop for a while. They can just be kids. If they play, if they do strength and conditioning, that can sort of be their arm care for a while if they do that. And then when they pick back up with practice, say it's November, December, they probably want to start that maybe like a month before to start to give their arm time to get back in shape. So if you just have that little buffer period, but still give them the off season to have some off season. Again, like the rules for younger kids are different where, again, I don't know that they need to do their arm care while they're just playing soccer and soccer season. As a pro athlete, as soon as the season's over, you're like in a race to try to get back as much of your strength as you can because it degrades over the season. Like your rotator cuff, it's proven through research, it just like sort of continually declines. So as soon as the first day of the season's over, you don't want to do it, but you really need to start hitting it hard again to like get built back up so you're ready. It's kind of like if you're a bear, you're like putting on your winter weight so you can make it through hibernation kind of. So really good question. But I would say just in general, if they're doing any kind of baseball activities or if they're about to start, that's probably the time to start with the arm care again.